for this discussion today. We're getting together with the Scottish Game Developers Association, or SGDA, together with community workers and events leaders from around the country. Just to tell you a bit more about the SGDA, they're a local chapter of the International Game Developers Association who aim to enhance the profile of the game development community as part of Scotland's cultural heritage by raising awareness of games and the roles they play in society and supporting the local game development scene. So Jaime is here from the SGDA, here to talk with us today, as well as Susie Buchan of Arcadia Fest, Beverley McMillan from BAFTA Scotland, and Jed Milroy of Tinderbox Collective. Hello everybody, how are you doing?
Good, very good, thank you.
Good, yeah.
Good, thanks for being here. So Jaime, I don't know if you want to say a bit about yourself for the SGDA, and then we can hear from everyone.
So, hello everyone, my name is Jaime Cross, my pronouns are he, him. I am on the board of the Scottish Game Developers Association, as Lucy has just said. So we are a Scottish-based charitable organisation. We used to be IGDA Scotland, which was when we were part of the IGDA, but we broke away from them 2 years ago now, just so we could try and do things a bit more locally without other stuff that we're having to deal with. We run a number of events, including talks. We've been looking to do workshops. We run our annual game jam play parties, which were part of the Play Away Festival this year on Friday just past. And we've had a little bit of a down year over 2020 with everything that's happened, but we're kind of using this to kickstart ourselves back again, do more digital online meetings, get things like workshops and talks and all the stuff that we used to do back on track. And I will pass off to Beverley McMillan if you want to go around in a circle and introduce yourselves and what you do.
Sure, I'm Beverley and I am the Learning and Events Producer at BAFTA Scotland. So it's my job to create and manage the events that we put on throughout the year. So we have obviously our membership. So for our members, we do weekly screenings and masterclasses and events, but we also have a public remit. And so we do work with those who are trying to forge a career in film, games and television. So we put on public events for this audience, and our biggest event, probably our flagship event for this area, is called Guru Live, which is an annual event where we have like a day of panels and masterclasses and roundtables and networking. And generally, as I say, it's normally in a day, but obviously this year we're going to be doing it a bit differently, and we'll be doing it online. So it's going to be taking place the first week in May this year, the 4th to the 7th of May. So that's kind of what I'll be working on just now.
Thank you. And next we have Jed Milroy from Tinderbox Collective.
Yeah, hi. Well, I'm the assistant director of Tinderbox, and obviously Tinderbox puts on Play Away Games Festival, which is our first proper foray into game design and being involved in the games industry, which has been incredibly exciting. And it really comes from our approach, which is all about, well, basically we're a collective of young people, youth workers, artists, community organizations that are working together to really just find inspiration and creativity wherever we can and bring that together, bring people together to get behind things. I mean, our main the way that we formed was around an orchestra, the idea of an orchestra, but making that orchestra as inclusive and as broad as possible to include all kinds of genres of music and young people from all kinds of backgrounds. And then that has led us on into lots of different kinds of youth work and visual art projects and a Tinderbox lab, which is all about making things, even with circuit boards and from scratch making stuff. And then also, the community side of our work is in the Sick Kids Hospital in Edinburgh. It's in different communities in Edinburgh, but we're based in Muirhouse in North Edinburgh. But we work with lots of different partner organisations across the country to basically try and bring young people together and get them into creative stuff.
Thank you. And last but not least, Susie Buchan of Creative Dundee and Arcadia Fest. I think you do a few things.
Hi, so I'm Susie Buchan. I'm a creative producer and I sort of work across all sorts of things, games, art and beyond, both in digital and physical spaces. So that's sort of a mix of events and workshops, experiences, and I guess mixing producing and curating and organising all these things. I'm a member of Biome Collective, which is a great community and online co-working space online at the moment in Dundee. And through that, I do a lot of work with Biome. Most recently, I co-produced Arcadia Night, which was back in December, which was a night of different games, sort of thinkers and designers from across the UK and beyond coming together and sharing their thoughts with people. In the past as well, I've worked with Neon Digital Arts Festival, which is the arts festival based in Dundee. And I also used to work at Abertay University, and we had a program called Weave by Abertay, and that was very much all about creating communities, especially within the students there, and sort of helping them find a community and connecting them with artists and designers and game makers locally, and again, internationally. We got lots of interesting speakers in. So that's pretty much what I do.
I suppose not quite last there. Lucy, if you want to do a quick intro for yourself.
Oh, thanks, Jaime. Yeah, hello. I'm Lucy, also from Tinderbox. I'm a program manager with Tinderbox Collective, my job is mostly organising and delivering creative events. Similarly to Jed, I'm more focused on the project management side, although Jed does as well. But I'm a musician too and a composer. My interest has always come mostly from games music as well. So I have a natural interest and bit of experience in games design and games music. And I've been mostly involved with probably the orchestra and the digital arts programs with Tinderbox as well as a. Oh, and Jack's reminded me, also I programmed the Playaway Festival. Yeah, so I've been mostly involved in Tinderbox Playaway Festival, bringing together all these amazing and interesting people. So that's me. I'll not ramble anymore.
So many hats.
So just before we get into things, we are gathering questions from the audience in our chat. So if you have anything that you want to ask anybody on the panel, please just type it in there. If it's somebody specific you want to ask that to, please put their name in. We will probably answer these at the end of the Q&A if we have time, which we hopefully will have. So yes, we're please. Well, I forgot what I was going that on. Never mind. But yes, please ask some questions and we'll hopefully get to them. So first things first, this panel is on fostering engaged communities, but what is a community? What does community mean to yourselves, our panelists? What do you think is a successful community, especially? And do you have any stories or moments or examples that you could share of that, or within yourselves or others that you've been part of? Jed, do you want to go first?
I'd love to. Community. Well, like the first thing it springs to mind when you say like an example of community, and then I can maybe think about what it means after that, would be like I started a folk music session 13 years ago in a pub in Edinburgh, and it essentially really it was an invitation. Like that was what the community that event was, me sitting in the corner of a pub and putting up a sign saying musicians sit here, and then me sitting there next to it going, okay, anyone want to do it? And then inviting people to come and sing a song, and keeping on inviting people for 13 years and just in that same routine is built what I would say as a community. And I would think it's a community because people feel that they belong to it. People say they belong to it. People feel that they can invite other people to join it. So it's we, it's not I. So the invitation comes from everybody. The welcome comes from everybody who sits around that table playing. And it also has a sort of extension. There's a community of people who play the music, but then there's a community of people who feel part of it by coming every week to the pub and listening and joining in from that point of view. And it's become meaningful because for a lot of people, it's become part of their identity over that long time. And They have, people have met and got married and have had kids through that network. People have died and we've marked their passing, and it's become part of the story of people's lives. And I feel that is also, I'm saying that about that because it's separate to other things and it's almost easier for me to see it. Whereas in Tinderbox, it's a much more rich and complicated web of things going on. And I think that, like, for me, yes. So what really matters about that for the meaning of community, I think, is that being part of communities, I think, can help people find a sense of identity, personal identity, and a sense of meaning that they can sort of hang the story of their lives on, which I think is really important for people's well-being, mental well-being, and the story they tell about themselves is so important. That'll do from me.
Thank you very much. Beverley, if you want to give an answer, you don't feel you need to.
Sure. No, just obviously agree exactly with what you're saying, Jed. But from a BAFTA point of view, I suppose it's a membership organisation, and we would obviously see ourselves as a community in that we all have the sort of shared values, or we all want to be part of the film, television and games industry. So we all have sort of shared knowledge, shared experiences. It takes more than one person to make a film or a game or a TV show. So it's about bringing people together. At BAFTA, we're very into people being connected. So it's all about networking, meeting new people, and then hopefully one day working with them. So obviously, as you say, as part of your identity, it's also a way of developing your career for BAFTA anyway. The way I see it, from the BAFTA point of view, it's about how you proceed through life, as well, being part of something.
Thank you very much. Susie, if you'd like to give your thoughts on the matter too?
Yeah, I guess agreeing with both what Jed and Beverley said. I guess if I'm thinking about, obviously I sort of are involved in producing a lot of events where community is key and thinking about that community audience. But for me, like personally, being part of Biome Collective, that has really helped me so much, just especially during the pandemic, to like feel like I have a place somewhere, and that having that support network within a community is just so nice to have. I'm full-time freelance now, but sort of went part-time freelance last summer, and that's also when I joined Biome. And just, having that support, we do sharings every week. And even if a lot of the time I don't have stuff to share because I'm not creating, artwork and games in the same way as other people, but just like having that every week to go into just really got me through lockdown, I think, and just being part of something. And I think it's really about being part of something, and through joining Biome, especially during the pandemic, it's sort of shown that, communities don't have to be physical, they can be online. And I think being part of a community like that, it can mean a lot to someone, and it can really change the way that they work and go about their everyday.
Thank you very much. So, kind of riffing on Jed's sign in the pub somewhere, communities have to start somewhere. They don't just, well, sometimes they do, bring out nothing or one or two people. So, for what have you found is the best ways to grow and build your communities or the organisations you work with? Susie, in particular for yourself, you've mentioned things like Weave and Neon, which have had sort of international collaborations as well. So I think it'd be quite interesting to hear how you helped develop those and reach out to those contacts and just grow it into what it became. If you want to start things off.
Sure. Sorry, I was reading the questions elsewhere and I was getting distracted. I guess just talking about like Weave and Neon and those like international collaborations and stuff. Actually, sorry, could you just ask the main question again, because I was completely distracted.
Sorry. It's just, what have you found have been the best ways to grow and build the communities and organisations that you've worked with?
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, both those examples with sort of working Weave and Neon, I sort of came into those organisations when there was a community established. But I do think more so with Weave, I got to guide that, and we sort of choose a direction for it, I guess. And I think it's so hard to say because it is something that sort of just happens naturally. But I know that when we were doing Weave, for example, like we would do these talks called Platform that were like monthly talks, and we'd get artists and designers from local ones and across the world to come in and chat to our students. You know, it was sort of about inspiring the students, but I think a lot of it was like listening to the students and seeing what they wanted as well. Like, you know, we had a team of ourselves, the main team, and some academics from Arcadia who would give suggestions, but it was very important to listen to our audience, go to the students and say, you know, what sort of things would help you in your work, and then base our sort of selections off of that as well. So I think to create a good community and to create something that people want to keep coming back to, you have to really involve them in the decision making. Yeah.
Thank you. I'd be interested to see, I mean, Beverley, you work with BAFTA. It's comparatively massive sort of organisation. It's got a lot of its own sort of international branches as well. So how do you develop sort of the work that you do for BAFTA Scotland specifically in that sort of framework, sort of reaching out, building the communities that people that you work with?
Yeah, I think, as Susie says, it is obviously listening to your audience as well and making sure you're delivering what they're looking for. But I think if you can start as young as possible, start trying to engage the youth of, you know, the next generation. There is a BAFTA Kids department, which some of you may be aware of, the Young Game Designers competition, and that's about encouraging kids aged between 10 and 18, I think it is, to get into the games industry. And so there's a website out there with lots of engaging content on it. There's templates, there's worksheets for schools, there's ideas generators, and it's all about trying to inspire the next generation. And so it's kind of, if you get them young, then they'll maybe follow their journey along with you, you know, so then they will come to the Guru Live when they're actually becoming, they're looking to get into the industry, then they'll maybe come to the Guru Live Festival and see what sort of careers there are. And then after that, eventually they would maybe become BAFTA members. So I think inspiring young people is a definite way of growing your audience. Maybe it might take a long time, but you know, you've got to start somewhere. And also just how we do it in Scotland as well. Just it's about trying to create content that people are going to keep coming back for, you know. So whether it is putting on regular events or, I don't know, repackaging content from old events, like making sure that you're engaging your community as often as possible, but with consistently and high quality, you know, and so that they know what to expect, and so that they trust you. They trust that whatever you're going to be putting out is worthy of their attention. So that's how we've been trying to do it after Scotland.
Thank you. Well, let's go on this point. Jed, I'd be interested to hear sort of your thoughts, especially when you mentioned your folk group. So that's a slightly more informal community organisation sort of thing. Obviously, not every community is going to have like a formalised structure like BAFTA Scotland, ourselves in SGDA, even Tinderbox. So I'd be interested to see your side, thoughts on that side of things, especially when we have some informal game developer communities that are forming in the various cities. So I know those Glasgow, Edinburgh, Dundee have their little groups as well, and probably other ones as well.
Yeah, I mean, like 100% agree with what Susie and Beverley have said there, and what comes across to me, like my first thought about it is passion. It's like the initial welcome and the initial start up of a community. I think really helps if there's like passion that is obvious and infectious, that people are drawn to either an individual or a group of individuals who are like really excited about what they're doing, and that I think can really help, especially say for example with us in our youth project in Muirhouse. It's like we have to go around the schools and meet people. So like it's like getting that face-to-face engagement with the people that you're trying to engage with, and really meet them on their own level, where they are. And as Susie was saying, a lot of that can really help if those people feel engaged with what you're doing or immediately, like saying, look, what can we offer? What do you want? We want to give you like the best thing that you could possibly get. Let's find out what everyone wants to do and do it. But actually, it can be quite hard to get answers to those questions until people are actually already feel part of it and already feel some sort of ownership of it. So you do need those first leaders, if you like, or those first engagers who get through the door and get it and are excited. And then, as Susie says, if you can get those people to feel a sense of ownership and to lead with their ideas, and then they start to get their friends in, that's when it becomes a community, because it's people feeling like a sense of we about it, and a sense of like wanting to bring other people in. And then, as Beverley was saying, I think, especially if you're doing that with younger people, for lots of reasons, that's a really good idea. But partly because young people are at school, are part of bigger organisations that you can engage with, like schools and other youth groups and things. And so building partnerships with other organisations where we can meet young people and invite them and properly invite them in a sort of passionate, excited way. And then standard, having a high quality thing to engage with is so important. As Beverley was saying, that like if you can offer someone an opportunity to be part of something they really think is of a high value and high quality, then that's when you start to get a real, I think, really strong buy-in, especially as they get people getting a bit older and a bit more aware of their career and things.
Thank you. Cool. So just as a heads up, we're about to talk about the previous hell year that was 2020. So moving into a lockdown and having to move into digital events has obviously been quite difficult for a lot of people, especially organising, especially for groups that used in-person events, such as most of us on the panel. So I'm curious, how have people managed to adapt what they offer and provide to communities? How has that worked out? And if there's any sort of particular challenges or successes that you've had off the back of these? I think it's quite interesting that both Beverley and Jed, you mentioned younger people there. So I'd be quite curious to see how your approaches have changed to reach those people when you are basically doing everything online. Beverley, if you don't mind going first.
Yeah, sure. We have been, again, Jed's just mentioned this, but we've been working with Into Film and Into Games. Oh, sorry, my internet is saying it's unstable. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Beverley.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we work with Into Film and Into Games, and it's about, so even this week I'm actually going to be doing a session with Into Film where they have access to the schools. You know, we at BAFTA, we don't necessarily have access, so we have to work with partnership organisations. So we will be working with Into Film on Friday to go into Alloa Academy and do a masterclass. We're doing it on animation. So it's obviously to get all the protocols in place to go online into schools. You know, there's so many things to sort of hoops to jump through. So that's why it's good working with partnerships. So we'll be doing that with Into Film. But everything else that we've been doing, you know, has been online. And so Guru Live, as I said, that's also for a sort of young audience, not as young, more sort of new entrants level. But again, it's just putting everything online on Zoom. So what it does mean is, though, that we'll be able to offer our services to a wider audience, and it really has broken down the geographical barriers. You know, anybody can now come to a BAFTA Scotland event. All our public events are online, so as long as people have access to, obviously, internet and have devices, they can come. And so that has been excellent, I think, in my opinion. That, you know, in the past we would maybe put on travel bursaries for people to come to our events, whereas there's no need for that now. It's obviously, from an event manager's point of view, we're not spending as much money either. You know, we don't have venue hires, we don't need to have speakers coming, like travel and accommodation. And again, it's easier to ask people to do something like this. It's easier for them, for their time. You know, if you're asking somebody to do a session for you for 60 minutes, it's fine. You don't need to bring them to the venue. You know, so there's been so many positives from it that hopefully we'll be able to translate some of them through to this year and beyond.
Yeah, the stuff you mentioned about access is quite interesting. That's something we within the SGDA have sort of struggled with a little bit, even though we operate out of the three main game dev cities of Glasgow, Edinburgh, and Dundee. And even getting people to travel to those cities outside of their own ones has been quite difficult. But one of the things we are quite aware of is it can be quite exclusive, especially when you consider games development as a thing and people want to access that. So stuff like this, it's really interesting to hear that you yourselves are being able to go beyond what you might usually have access to bring people that you might not necessarily be able to bring up from wherever they may be. And it's really interesting. It'd be interesting to hear if it has helped sort of equalise that access for people, especially younger people. Jed, I don't know if you want to answer any, like chime in here or anything.
Yeah, I feel like, similarly to what Beverley said, say for, what springs to mind first of all is like our youth club, right? So we were running a Tuesday night youth club where there was 50 kids coming every Tuesday night to a arts centre in Muirhouse, mostly from like the Muirhouse Pilton area, but also some people coming from like other parts of the city, but you know, fairly limited like that. Now our online youth club there are people coming from all over the place, including other countries, people who used to come every Tuesday but now they moved to Poland or whatever, and a young person who has got their immune system's compromised, so they're not allowed to go out, and they weren't anyway before the pandemic, but now they're able to come every week because they're online. So that's great, and so there's more engagement, or you could say that our community is more engaged, and the young people are coming together. We're having a Zoom meeting, and there's a certain amount of informal chat that's able to happen, and people are able to keep their friendships going in this, in these environments, and share their creativity and continue to learn things and share the thing it is that they have in common, which might make them say they were a community. So that's really positive. The things that like come to mind are how, I definitely feel that the quality of their social interaction has been affected. It's like they can't kind of like go off and have a chat in the corner about whatever it is they would talk about, or like, all the things that happen like slightly behind the scenes at a youth club, and all the great stuff that happens, you know what I'm talking about, all these things, so many things. And it's like there's so much been lost as well, but there has also a lot has been gained. And I feel like what I feel is most important from now is managing to try to keep the best of both as we go forwards. How are we going to keep the best of both things? Like hybrid environments, how is that going to work? But we're going to have to do it, because these kids who are in other countries or in hospital or wherever, how are they going? We must keep offering that engagement as we get back to like sort of face-to-face meeting. And so that's interesting. And then the other thing I was going to say is I can't remember, so it doesn't matter. We'll move on.
No, that's great to hear that not only you've got what it sounds like a very local project is managing to be now essentially an international thing. If you've got people accessing it from different countries, that's quite incredible to hear. Susie, if you've got anything you'd like to add to this point at all, I know with you. Oh, sorry, on you go.
Oh, no, you can go.
Okay. I was just going to ask, I know you, when you were organising Arcadia, I'm trying to remember if it was it last year you've run one? What considerations did you have to do for the various speakers, whether people that you didn't have access to that you now could access, and again, vice versa? Did it basically change how you approach developing your festival?
Yeah, I think it definitely it changed the approach in both like positive and negative ways. In terms of the speakers, so for example, Arcadia in December, it was one night and it was just 10 speakers and they were all 5-minute micro talks. So, you know, if that was a physical event, us going out to 10 people and saying, can you all come to Dundee? You're only going to speak for 5 minutes. And then that will be the event done. You know, they would be like, I'm not traveling from London to come up to Dundee to speak for 5 minutes. So I think that was really positive that we could, you know, we had someone who was based in Germany, we had some people in London, we had people from across Scotland, which was really nice as well. And obviously, like past Arcadia events we have had people from all over in the past as well. But I think just for that little 5-minute thing, it was really nice that we could get those people so quickly. I also think it was interesting, like in terms of the event itself, we sort of asked people after, you know, how they felt like compared to past Arcadias, like, and a lot of people really said that they enjoyed it sort of just as much as past Arcadias, even though it was different. And the thing that I really liked about it was that when the event was going on, and it was getting streamed to YouTube, so people could like, you know, type in the YouTube comments, but there was little chats going on in those comments. So a bit like you were saying, Jed, it's hard for those separate conversations to go on. I think especially when you're a big call with people, things like streaming events to YouTube or Twitch, that really sort of helps create that sense of, you know, because people can at each other in the comments, they're having their little conversations about separate things. And I was really surprised as to how active people were from the get-go. And it sort of made me laugh because I was, you know, thinking back to the Arcadia the year before, which was held in the V&A, and, you know, everyone filters in and lots of people go with people, but they'll just go in and they'll sit down and sort of they're ready to listen to people. People aren't really talking to random people in the audience, being like, oh, I'm not sure about this thing. Like, what do you think? That just doesn't happen at live events. So I really liked that can happen in the comments of these online things, and people who normally just would not chat at live events, especially if people are a bit shy or they just don't want to go up to people. That sort of online sense is really interesting. And then sort of touching a bit on what Jed said about hybrid events, I think hybrid events are definitely like going to be the way forward. I personally don't really I find it hard to, I've seen lots of people be like, you know, talk about when things go back to normal and how, you know, we'll do this physical event, but I don't think things are going to go back to normal. And, you know, you have to think about those people, like if they've got autoimmune diseases and stuff like that, if they can't, you know, they weren't able to go to these events before, and now it's great because this is opened up to them, but we don't want to close these events off to people. So yeah, maybe we can touch on that later, but I think the sort of future of events will be both physical and digital. Yeah.
Can I just chime in really quickly? It's like, I mean, these points are so fascinating, but just something I was thinking about Arcadia as well. Sorry, Jaime, this is all right. But I also remember, Susie, I think you had a game developer who had like a pitch meeting immediately before or afterwards. And I thought it was amazing that somebody could like come in and have this really interesting conversation and then had the ability to be like, okay, bye, I've got to go.
Yeah, we had to like shuffle things about because we had our sort of back channel chatting to the people speaking, and the guy was like, I've got this pitch meeting, like, because we were running a bit over, so we could shuffle things about really quickly as well and be like, okay, you can go on. And it's quite nice seeing that you can just switch from one thing to another. You know, you don't have to block out your entire evening, entire day to take part in this one event.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. And it's quite, leading on to sort of the next question, it's quite interesting to hear about sort of people trying to engage these small chats, because games and games developers are notoriously insular, shy, shall we say. So I'm quite curious to hear how all of you in your respective groups have managed to basically have worked with games, how that has worked out for you through your organisations and vice versa, if that's possible, and what makes games, digital interactive media, interesting to yourselves and your communities. Jed, if you want to go first.
The interesting thing is that one of our main responses to the pandemic has been to put on a games festival, and that really sort of, I think, shows the nature of games at this point for us, because our main what we're trying to do is engage a community of young people in the creative arts. And we've suddenly realized that at this point, given all the circumstances, games is like probably the pinnacle of that. Because you can engage with it online, and it's just so appropriate for online engagement. And there's so many games with so many interfaces and different offerings, and also that it combines so many art forms, music, visual art, kind of design, just everything, and storytelling. You know, it's all there, and doing it online together is like the best way of engaging with that, certainly to start with. And so the Games Festival has been a response to that, and I think we will find, or we hope that we're going to be able to found an ongoing engaged youth club, a game design youth club going on from this. Hopefully that it will found that and keep it going. That's my first response to that.
Could I just add, sort of, I was just thinking in the back of other things, like, I feel very lucky to be like working in the place that I'm working, because obviously even before this happened, I was quite used to working digitally, and I'd done online stuff in the past, but like, you know, there's lots of communities where that switch will, like, sort of non-games communities, non-digital communities, that will be finding that switch like a lot harder. Like, I worked at a book festival before, and their, you know, event, lots of people came to the town. All of the volunteers most of them were retired. And I was just sort of wanting to say that we're quite lucky to be in this place to have audiences that can do this sort of stuff, but there's lots of maybe communities who can't quite tap into that as well as maybe we can here.
I'd be quite interested. So, Beverley, the Guru Live program that BAFTA Scotland operates is a very obvious intersection of games and other disciplines. I'd be quite interested to see if there has been any sort of mixing at those events that has come up with anything that you know of.
Well, yeah, there has, like, I have had industry professionals, maybe not the new entrants, maybe who come to Guru Live to watch the masterclasses, but actually maybe the speakers, you know, so more of the maybe game speakers have asked to meet up with people in film and TV industry side of things. So I've helped set up a few meetings that way, just because they're obviously looking to forge their careers, and how film, TV and games is starting to converge slightly, you know, and so they're hoping to make contacts in the film and television world. So there has been instances of that, and obviously you can see from Hollywood, you know, with people like Steven Spielberg writing for games, and Peter Jackson, that it's kind of, there's definitely proliferation, you know, of the two, of all industries. So it's definitely something that we want to continue, bringing everybody into the room from all the different disciplines. It's not structured, it's in that way. Maybe that's something that we should do to structure it, but there's definitely been ad hoc instances for sure.
No, that's great. It's good to hear that they are actually communicating with each other, and even I'd hope vice versa as well, like sort of film and TV people approaching games just because they might just be interested in what that is. As I mentioned, we are notoriously difficult industry to break into, even like for other creative people to approach us. And it's been one of the sort of things that we know through the SGDA we want to expand upon. We want to hear from other disciplines and have games people, or people who are interested in making games, we hear from them and what overlap there might be, how they can basically take some ideas or creative practices from elsewhere and apply them to their own work or their own projects, whatever they might do. So yeah, it's good to hear that there are sort of mixing opportunities going on.
I think as well, though, it is, in my experience, it has been that games practitioners are happy to come and do events for us, but they're never proactive. So it's maybe more of a reactive thing. So whereas I maybe have film or TV producers coming to me and saying, "Oh, I've got a great idea for an event," you know, it's not coming from the games industry. You have to go to them. So maybe, as you say, that's because maybe are a bit more insular in that sense. But hopefully we'll break through.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that, having to put on some game events. I'm just aware of the time just now, so we might move on to some Q&A if that's all right with everybody.
Yeah, we've had some great ones popping up as well. I'm really keen to hear what everyone thinks about these.
Will we start with the bolded ones in the list that we've got so far, Lucy? Is that
yeah, I think so. Up to you as well, but yeah, those are from the audience, so sounds good to me.
So first question is from Claire to Beverley. With most things being moved to online, how has this impacted the way that you're able to encourage young people to get involved with BAFTA Scotland?
So how do we encourage, or you say, what? Can you read that again? Sorry, Jaime.
So with things being moved to online, how has this impacted the way you're able to encourage young people to get involved with BAFTA Scotland?
I actually think it's an easier sell now that to get people to be involved with BAFTA Scotland, because as I mentioned earlier, I think in the pre-meet, people have a sort of preconception of BAFTA being such a huge brand and quite distinguished, and maybe they would never want to come to a BAFTA event. But whereas when we moved everything online, it does feel more accessible and maybe not as nerve-wracking to come to a BAFTA session. So I actually think it's been quite a positive thing for us, maybe just getting our name out there, because there's loads of online masterclasses and events happening for film and TV and games, and we're sort of competing in that marketplace. But it just feels that, as I say, it's just more accessible and inclusive, I think, being online.
Thank you. The next question is from Sean Carroll, and it is for everybody. Can anyone talk about any specific challenges they've encountered in fostering a community or lessons they have learned? Learned, Scottish. Susie, you want to start with this one?
I can try. If anyone else has a thought before me, you can jump in.
Obviously, putting you on the spot a bit. If you don't have an example, please don't worry about it.
Well, I'm just thinking about like for us, and I think it's something that's come up in the chat since that question was asked, really, is from Nikki, and I think somebody else was talking about it as well, Robin, is this the idea that as soon as you call something like a games festival or an orchestra or a music club, then immediately it sort of can easily have this what's it called, polarizing effect, where someone says, music, no, that's not for me, or gaming, that's not for me. And so it's like working against the problem of people defining themselves and putting themselves in boxes and saying, well, that's not for me. And so it's like, how can you make it clear that what you're offering is for everybody, and that you really believe that everybody could enjoy it or get something out of it and become part of it? So for me, the way of getting around that is a very practical, and it's something that so often doesn't happen, is that you just try to get into the room or into the virtual room with individual people and invite them personally, or you ask people who are part of the project already to ask their friends personally and explain, look, it doesn't matter about whether you're good or not or anything else. It just matters, come along to have fun and join in. But people always build up, I think, a kind of sense of us and them or other. And it's about trying to break that down, say, look, we're all together. And and also, if you're offering something that's a high standard, especially if you're saying we're the best, we're like the best youth orchestra in Scotland, or like this is the most, this is the best games festival in Scotland, that also can really put some people it can attract, but other people it can put off. So somehow you've got to be both things at the same time. And I think it's all about the invitation, and it's about spending a lot of time, a huge amount of time on making the relationships with partner organizations or individuals to make sure they feel properly invited.
I think that's a really good point, Jad. Like, I've definitely had experience with that sort of thing as well. Actually, just thinking back to Arcadia, so I studied contemporary art. I'm not from a games background originally, and I've sort of shifted over to this side. But I've got a lot of friends who are artists, and they don't really do anything digital. And two of my close friends who are sort of artists and makers and do lots of amazing stuff with their hands, like weaving and really detailed drawing. I asked them to come along to Arcadia, and they came along, and they would have never bothered with it if I hadn't been involved in it, or I hadn't specifically asked them. But the event was 3 hours, and they ended up watching the whole thing, and they were sort of amazed. They were like, there's so much stuff that I did not know about at all, but that can apply to the work that we do. And I think people are really hesitant to sort of, a lot of the time, mix those communities, and things being labeled as games or as art puts a lot of people off. And it's definitely something that, I'm still working on and trying to work out how those communities can mix. Like in Dundee, in-game have been working with Creative Dundee to try and do that and try and get, the wider creative communities, the more traditional creative communities, to mix with the games industry. And I think, you have to create those partnerships and create those relationships. But, hopefully over the next few years, once those relationships have been created, we can start to see some interesting things come out of it. Yeah, I think we should just have a festival that's like a nothing festival. So you can have just bits of everything. Yeah.
I think that sounds good.
I think this is kind of referencing some of the other questions that have been asked as well at the same time. But I think one of the important things about making a community and fostering a community is you can't necessarily just let it run riot, for example. You've got to make it welcoming to people, and sometimes that includes things like moderation. Games especially has a reputation for being very white, very male, macho, and all the other nonsense that people sometimes still perpetuate, unfortunately. And if you want to build a welcoming or inclusive community, you need to essentially lay some ground rules and know that certain things won't be tolerated. Have a proper sort of approach to people who can say, look, something happened, I'm not very comfortable with it, and how you go and basically handle those situations to make sure that, you know, it doesn't happen again, and people do feel welcome and know that if something pops up, you can solve that issue to the best of your abilities. And games, again, it's getting better, but it's still not necessarily the greatest, especially given the wide range of people and the sort of general size of games as it is. But specifically with things of games development, I think it's quite important that people don't necessarily have to feel that you have to be like a programmer with like 5 years experience and 2 degrees and all the other rest of it that you see. People can make games using things like Betsy, and you sell them on itch.io and just do them, make them because they want to make them and no other reason, and that's fine. They still make games. People can do this as an entire like hobby and still make great, I don't know if you want to call them art, but great games. Some people may consider them art depending on what your definition is, but that's a whole other philosophical debate that's not really part of this discussion. But there was a sort of specific question about how do you make sure that suggestions for what games and game dev communities can make it clear to people who, air quotes, don't fit the profile are welcome. So I think some of those, even if they might be slightly awkward personally for people who organise these communities do, I think those are quite important. Just, you know, having rules to a degree and being very open about a game's a game if people play it, and it doesn't necessarily have to fit into these weird constraints that are popularised in like the most popular media. Sorry, I went on a little tangent there. But sort of coming back to that, Duff has a question for everybody. That is, does providing a space for a community to talk about your events and content help foster that, such as Discords or group chats, or is that something you leave to form on their own? So coming back to my point, I think it's good to have your own Discord that you can kind of manage, especially if it's something that you're attaching to yourselves. But I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in on that. I don't know who to start with here, if anybody wants to jump in first.
Or the crossover specifically with other communities, you know, out with games or that are loosely connected. I'd be really interested to hear the same thing from other organizations too. Maybe Jez, I don't know if anything's popped up for you.
Well, yeah, like I would say that I see, say, a Discord or a Zoom call or a youth or a community centre. They are like, I've tried from the very beginning of the pandemic to look at a Zoom call or a Discord channel as the building, you know, and buildings have a culture around them, you know, and so I think it's absolute of paramount importance how you set the culture, how you set up the interaction, and for the community to be held by, be contained within, and how the culture of that space is set up. You know, it's the kind of architecture, you know, it's like, so like North Edinburgh Arts, where we're based, it's a brilliant building for a great many reasons, but one of them is that there's a cafe, there's a communal space, and then there are lots of little spaces off that, and each space, we all know, those of us who work there, what benefits each space has over others, and what kind of workshop's best in each space. And I think that translates into the all the different types of platform that we now have at our disposal, like what Zoom would be better for, as opposed to like what Discord would be better for, or whatever else. And I think, yeah, there's a huge amount of care and consideration needs to be put into those things. And from our point of view, it certainly has to be our initiative to set those things up carefully and invite people to them carefully, make sure everyone feels safe in them. Because of the way that we work. I'm not sure how everybody else feels about that.
No, that's really good. I don't know, Beverley, Susie, if you have any thoughts you want to add?
Yeah, no, absolutely agree with Jed in that sense. Just as an aside, BAFTA also has a bullying and harassment guidelines and sort of policy templates that, you know, everybody who is who owns a company should have a bullying and harassment policy in place. And so BAFTA's kind of taken it on themselves to develop a checklist for what people should have and a template for that policy. And what BAFTA started doing is, if you want to enter your game, your film, your TV into any of our awards ceremonies, you now have to tick a wee box to say that you are aware of that you should have a BAFTA a bullying and harassment policy, and you have to tick that. We're not saying that they have to take the policy that the template that we're suggesting, but it's just to raise the awareness of it, really. So we kind of try and push that message out as best we can. And but obviously that's different to doing an online event.
Yeah, I was just going to add, like, I think putting stuff like that in place, like if you look, for example, like at Discord servers that are just full of people that are interested in one thing, or even like people that stream on Twitch, like they've all got those sort of things in place to make sure that their communities feel safe. And I think, you know, for bigger organizations, if there's ever like a big organization or a big event putting something on that doesn't have those things in place, then you sort of have to question that a bit and be like, well, you know, I'm part of these small Discords with maybe like 30 people in them, and even they have, you know, you have to like click on the emoji underneath the thing to say that you've read the guidelines. Like there's mods in there, you can report people. You know, there's things in place like people can have the pronouns in the Discord, like stuff like that, just to make other people feel comfortable. And I think looking at really small communities like that is a really good example of how that can be done well, and how that, you know, it's and just how important it is in creating these communities and making sure that everyone feels safe.
Great. So we're going to have one last question before we sign off. Can the panel signpost communities that they find inspiring? We'll finish off with quite a nice one. Jed, do you want to lead the charge on this one?
Yeah, I was thinking about. I mean, there's so many. Just now, I find New Haven Community Choir really inspiring. They are. I'm kind of a big part of setting that up, but they're very much based on heritage, and so they're talking about, like, they sing songs and write songs about things that happened like 200 years ago in New Haven. And their average age is certainly over 60, but there are people that they have embraced moving online in the most passionate way. And there's a 86-year-old guy in there who is berating me for not being on Linux, because he's like, I thought you were I thought you were stood for like socialism and you know, I thought you stood for like community values. How can you not use Linux? What's wrong with you? And he's like 86. He's taught himself to use this. You know, like they believe so passionately in what they perceive to be their community's values, which was a social, you know, like a working community that stood for like the values that they had about inclusivity and not leaving anybody behind. And they've taken that online into their weekly rehearsals, and there's someone who's like in their 90s who phones, she hasn't even never had a computer, doesn't have a smartphone, but phones into the choir rehearsal and sings on the landline, sings along for an hour every week, and she writes a new poem for the group every week. It's just, you know, they just get on with it.
Susie, if you'd like to go next, please.
Sure. I think there's definitely like so many. I'm trying to think of like thinking of ones in Dundee. A lot of mine are Dundee based just because that's where I am. But I've always really admired the Dundee International Women's Centre. Like they do loads of great work, and I know that they're trying really hard to like put events online for people, you know, from women all over the world who live in Dundee. And also Creative Dundee have a community called the AMPS community, and it's like, I think it's every Tuesday morning they meet, and there's a very small membership, but you don't have to pay if you can't, and it's for people to talk about the creative projects that are ongoing. and obviously being part of Biome myself. But I think the main like community sense that I've maybe felt during lockdown is I never watched like streamers, people streaming games on Twitch or YouTube or anything like that. But during lockdown, I found that to be a real, just it really gives you that sense of community, like watching someone live playing something and like following along in the comments. And I'm not going to suggest anyone in particular because there's so many people. And I think it's really like, just go on to like Twitch or YouTube and like look up what people are streaming and, you know, get chatting to people in the comments. Or even I love having it on the background in my work because it's like, it's almost like being in an office and having something else happening while you're doing your stuff. But yeah, that's what I'd recommend.
Thank you very much. And lastly, Beverley, if you have any suggestions.
I'm just trying to rack my brains. I suppose what I've been doing is it's more sort of well-being type of groups. There's a local group. I stay in a small village in Lochlinnoch in Renfrewshire. So there's like a local group where there's lots of well-being tips and the sort of live exercise classes, again, that kind of thing, going for walks, lovely, like people just taking their cameras and walking around the village, just anything that's going to help you with your mental well-being during this time, I think has been really useful, to be honest.
No, that's an important point to sort of finish up on. So I want to say thank you to our panelists for agreeing to this and coming along. I'm going to hand over to Lucy to finish everything up. But thank you, everybody, for joining and being part of this.
Thanks,
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jaime. And yeah, thanks again, Beverley, Jed, and Susie. It's been really interesting. And thank you to our audience for coming along and asking so many interesting questions as well. It's really got me thinking. And something we are hoping to do with Playaways is take this new community that we've built and brought together further in various ways. So definitely keep an eye out to see what we've got planned and coming up to follow it on.